I'm just going to work all the way up to PRP. Okay, if you read, then you know we're going to talk about pulse sound, we're going to talk about the spatial pulse length and the pulse duration. And you're going to see the relationship. You guys are probably already going to know some of these definitions because they're very similar to the parameters, the acoustic parameters. So guys, this chapter right here, describing pulse waves. Last chapter were the parameters for describing sound waves in general, whether continuous or pulse. But now specifically we're going to talk about pulse waves because we know in diagnostic ultrasound, we use ultrasonic pulses, right? Because with continuous waves, y'all remember from first semester, continuous waves don't produce an image. So we know in diagnostic ultrasound, we produce an image. So we deal with pulse ultrasound. So we send ultrasounds out in pulses, so that gives the sound enough time to bounce back so the transducer can pick it up and read it. Then it's going to send out another pulse. Okay? It's going to continuously send out pulses instead of it being continuous. Use my board today. This is why I like having it dark in here because it's hard to see. So, continuous wave, guys. As you can see, continuous wave, the sound, the transducer. Remember we talked about that last semester. We talked about a continuous wave transducer, also known as what, guys? Y'all remember? PDOF probe, right? A PDOF probe. Okay. You see that the sound waves never stop traveling. They're always. So, what language I always use is talking. Whenever the sound wave being produced, it's talking. It's transmitting. Okay. So continuous wave, it never stops. It's never going to stop. It's not going to produce an image. Because it never stops, it never gives the transducer time to receive those reflected waves. Okay? You see with pulse wave, we have these gaps right here, right? These gaps in time, that's actually the listening time. That's the listening time of the transducer. So an ultrasound say this is the first pulse. It's going to send that pulse. This is the first pulse. It's going to send this pulse out first. Then it's going to listen for those returning echoes. Because remember, we know how ultrasound works. It sends out sound waves. It hits the media. Then it bounces back to the transducer. Right? So during that break time, during this off time, or listening time, or receiving time, it's actually waiting on those echoes to come back. Okay? And then it's going to send out another pulse. Ultrasound assumes that that's how it works. Okay, it assumes that it sends out a pulse, that pulse goes out, and it comes back. Then it sends out another one. Mind you, guys, this is happening so fast. This is happening in less than 1 microsecond. It's happening that fast. You know, so that's why you have that constant motion on your image, that it appears like that, even though it's really not, right? Because we know that it's listening for the sound as well. So while it's just happening so fast that it's happening faster than the eye can catch it, so it appears that it's in motion, right? But it's really not. Okay. So this chapter right here, we're going to talk specifically about pulsed waves. All right. We have 5 more parameters added to the pulse waves. Okay. 5 more parameters. Okay. So pulsed with image. Because in diagnostic ultrasound, we need to have an image for us to be able to look at the different body organs and media. Okay. Remember, however intense that the ultrasound reflects back, that's gonna, whatever intense is going to be reflected as a shade of white. If the beam transmits, then it's no reflection, so it's going to be transmitted as black, right? Which is why you don't see anything in the bladder, because it's fluid, so ultrasound is going to transmit through that fluid. Okay?
If it doesn't transmit,
it's going to be represented as black. However, the intensity of the returning echoes, that's going to be assigned a shade of gray or a shade of brightness. So if it reflects like bone, it's gonna come real intense, right? And it's gonna be reflected as white. If it's something like fluid, it's gonna be represented as black. Okay, everything else, all the other soft tissue structures are going to be represented by a shade of gray, which is why if you have like a fatty liver or something like that, it's going to come back brighter because it's reflecting back at a higher intensity than, say, the kidney. Okay. So, this chapter right here, we're going to discuss the difference between continuous and pulse waves. We've already done that. All right. We're going to identify the 5 new parameters, guys, that describe pulse waves. Those are pulse duration, pulse repetition period, pulse repetition frequency, duty factor, and the spatial pulse length. Okay. Some of these, like I said, you already kind of know what it is because it's telling you. It's like, for example, pulse duration is the time it takes that pulse, right? The time. Spatial pulse length is the length of that pulse. Okay, in distance. So some of them, if you just look at the word itself, or the parameter itself, you can kind of figure out what it's telling you. Okay, so you know if I'm talking about pulse duration, we know those units are going to be in time, right? When I'm talking about spatial pulse length, similar to wavelength, it's going to be represented in distance. Okay. We're also going to learn again, guys. You guys have the handout. We're going to learn the specific characteristics to those pulse wave parameters, including units, the typical values, whether it's determined by the source, and whether it's adjustable or not. Okay? All right. We're good, guys?
Mm.
All right. Moving right along. So, continuous versus pulse wave ultrasound. Man, I already drew this up here, guys, but in diagnostic ultrasound, continuous sound waves cannot create anatomic images, which is why if you guys, you know, the little PDOF probe, it can pick up Doppler signal. We use that a lot when we're doing, remember I said transcranial Dopplers? When we're trying to look at the circle of Willis in the brain, or we're trying to see whether it's a stenosis in the circle of Willis, we're going to use that continuous wave transducer. Okay? So we're just listening for velocities. So if it's a stenosis, then it's probably going to be a really high velocity, because when there's stenosis, or it creates resistance. So through that thin space there is blockage, blood is going to travel really fast through there. So your velocities coming back on your continuous wave are going to be very high. Okay. But instead, diagnostic ultrasound systems produce short bursts or pulses to create every picture of anatomy, because it has, like I said, guys, it has a talking time when the pulse is on and a listening time when there's no pulse. Okay, it's waiting on those reflected sound waves to come back. All right, continuous wave, it's always talking. Like me, I'm continuous wave, I'm always talking. All right. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. All right, so it's kind of counting out real quick. When we're talking about pulse ultrasound, we're talking about, in diagnostic ultrasound, we're talking about between 2 to 4 pulses. 2 to 4 cycles. Okay, because more than a pulse is just considered more than one cycle. That's considered a pulse. We've already learned the characteristics or the description of what a cycle is, right? Now we're talking about pulses, which is just putting what we're doing right here. We're just putting more. These how many pulses do I have on my I'm sorry. How many cycles do I have on my pulse sound?
6. Continuous 6.
No, just
I haven't heard the right answer yet.
how many pulse?
It's 2.
2
We
pulse,
have
yeah.
two cycles.
Cycles.
2 cycles.
Yeah,
It's 2 cycles. Remember, we're going to start right there. This is going to be 1.
Yeah.
Then right here, that's going to be 2. Remember, when you're counting cycles, you're counting from the beginning of one wave to the beginning of the next one. Okay? So that's up, down, that's 1. Up, down, that's 2. I have 2 cycles in this pulse. Okay?
Oh, so
It's 2 to 4 cycles for ultrasound. 2 to 4 cycles is what we use in diagnostic ultrasound.
So, if you add that question on the test, it's going to be 2 or 6. Just like 2 for each.
If I ask you how many cycles are in that pulse, you're just gonna say 2.
Okay.
You're just gonna say 2. Because I'm just asking you how many cycles. I'm not asking you the frequency.
Okay.
So you don't worry about a unit when it comes to that. Okay.
So like this one here, it's 4, right?
Absolutely. So guys, let's count these up because it says it right on the bottom, guys. I'm sorry I stretched the image out so much, but I was trying to make it big enough for us to see. So you see right here it says seconds per pulse is 4 cycles, right? So we're gonna start at the very beginning. Up, down, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 cycles in that pulse. Okay? We got that, guys?
So it's called pulse because it's the way it starts from starting to the end.
A pulse is just more than 1 cycle is considered a pulse. More than 1 cycle. I'm trying to make that definition as easy as possible, as plain, as simple as it can be. If it's more than 1 cycle, that's a pulse. Okay?
That has nothing to do with time, right?
Yeah, definitely. It has a lot to do with time.
Per second.
Hmm?
Is that 4 pulse per second? Or
No, when I'm asking you how many cycles, I'm just asking you how many oscillations are happening within that pulse.
yeah, but not with the time.
Not with the time, but definitely with respect to the pulse parameters, it has to do with time. Definitely with respect to the pulse parameters, have to. But when I'm just asking how many cycles, remember, cycles is not, I'm just asking the numbers. And it doesn't have a unit for cycles. Okay? So cycles is our event. Cycles are our event. If I ask you how many cycles per second, then I'm asking you for like the frequency, right? Right? Okay. All right. So, like I just said, pulse ultrasound is a collection of cycles that travel together. All right. The pulse has a beginning and an end, right? And the pulse is made up of individual cycles that move together as a single unit. So even though these are multiple cycles, that create a pulse, they're still traveling together. So when if they travel deeper in the body, they're going to attenuate at the same rate. Okay, because it's just one single unit of pulses. All of those 3 collection of pulses that I drew, right? Because I drew 3. Those 3 collections of pulses that I drew, 2 cycles per pulse, they're all traveling together. So boom, those two cycles are traveling. Then it's going to listen. Another 2 cycles are traveling, then it's going to listen. Another 2 cycles are going to travel, then it's going to listen. Okay? And I just drew 2 just because I wanted to draw more than 1. I was trying to represent a pulse. I could have drew 4 like the previous picture. Okay? Pulse ultrasound has 2 components. I already kind of talked about this a little bit. So first it has, remember, these terms, number 1, are all synonymous terms. They all mean the same thing. So be careful if I say the transmit, or talking, or on time. Okay? So it has a component where it's basically sending and listening, talking and listening, on and off, transmit and receive. It's like communication. All right? So the 2 cycles first would be either transmitting, talking, and on time, meaning that it's producing a pulse when it's on, when it's talking, when it's transmitting. It's producing a pulse. Boom, I sent out that pulse. That's talking time right there. So, like I said, continuous wave, always talking. Right here, this little span right here, that's when this is talking. In pulse sound. This little span right here, that's when it's listening. Or listening, also known as the off time or the receive time, because it's called receive because this is allowing the transducer to receive those reflected sound waves from the medium. Okay. So I like the example the book gives you. It says, think of a train. Even though a train is traveling as a single unit, right? The train is all traveling, but each caboose can be considered its own individual pulse. Okay? Even though it's all traveling as one, we see that there's separation within those carts, right? So all of these, I like that example because that can be considered a pulse. This little time in between, that little space in between, that's when it's listening. That's another pulse. That time in between, that's when it's listening. But when we know a train is traveling, it's all traveling at one time. It's all traveling together.
And is that whole thing called unit?
That would be a pulse. The whole thing would be a pulse, traveling as a unit. Yes, ma'am. It's traveling as one structure. Okay. We're good, guys, when we're talking about pulse ultrasound? Again, guys, remember, pulse, when we're talking about pulse ultrasound and diagnostic ultrasound, it's going to be 2 to 4 cycles. 2 to 4 cycles. Okay? That's going to come into play when I'm talking about the next thing, which is pulse duration. Okay. Pulse duration actually tells you what it is in the definition. Similar to the period, right? The period deals with time as well. So pulse duration, guys, we're talking about pulse ultrasound. That's the actual time from the start of the pulse to the end of the pulse. Again, that time where it's talking, that's the pulse duration right there. Just my talking time. That's my pulse duration. Okay? If we respect the time, of course. We respect the time, of course. Okay? So that talk when it's talking, that's gonna be my pulse duration. That's the whatever we measure that time as, that's gonna be the pulse duration, how long.
Just like period.
Just like similar to period. Similar to period. Similar to period. I don't want to say just like period, because period just deals with sound waves in general,
Right.
not pulse waves. All right. It's also similar to period in which it's in